Hi. Well, it's another beautiful day, as always, though it's cold. And today I'd like to talk about emotions. Now, your emotions really are not what you think they are. For instance, if you're afraid, then you get this panicky feeling in your chest, and maybe your stomach feels weird, and you know, you get scared. Okay? But similarly, if you're in ecstasy, you get this weird feeling in your chest. Maybe your stomach feels a little weird, and so on and so forth. It's the same reaction in your body. Your body only has so many ways of reacting, and whether it's fear or ecstasy, it's the same reaction. What's different about the two is how we see them. Now, I'm sure you've all experienced ecstasy, whether it being sexual or whatever nature, and I'm sure you've all experienced fear. And although you think there are different things happening in your body, it's the same. That's why people love horror movies, because they get that ecstatic feeling by being scared, even though they're not really scared because they're not in danger. So, that's the situation. Now, you can see the context of your feeling that you're having. Okay, you know the context because that's just part of it. And that context tells you whether or not it's fear or ecstasy. That's crazy world, isn't it? And that's the same thing for a lot of other things, okay? And how you see your emotions, okay? How you see any event is how what you say it is, okay? That's all there is to it, okay? It's strictly a mental process in your head, okay? It has nothing to do with what's real, okay? Now, I'm not saying there's not scary things out there. I'm not saying that you can't get injured and all sorts of other bad stuff. What I am saying is how you see any emotion is based on the context of the event. And so, therefore, to fear is the same feeling as to have ecstasy. Okay? That's just the way it is. And all that means is that how you see any event is based on the context of the event. Okay? And that's basically the whole deal. All right? We see these emotions and we label them as, frightening and so on and so forth. Okay? But it's not really what you think it is, because the feeling that you're feeling is neutral. You put the meaning into it. Okay? That's just the way it is. And by putting the meaning into it, you're deciding, okay, how you're going to react, how it's going to affect you. Okay? That's simple as that. Okay? We are meaning making machines. All right? And we have put the meaning to various things, and that's the way it is. And so, from whenever we feel that, if it's not ecstasy, we know it's fear. Okay? Or worry, anxiety, so on and so forth. Okay? And so that's how the emotions go. And by looking at the experience of the fear or the ecstasy or the anxiety or the sadness, we can see that what we're feeling isn't necessarily as bad as we think it is. Okay? And once again, this is putting awareness into an emotion. And you can do that in the now. You can't do it anywhere else because you are in the trap. The trap of being human. That's just the way it is. Now, all this is just how your body is affected by the emotional response that you have. And that includes everything that you've experienced and how you've seen the world. You decide what the meaning is. You decide what's going on. And then you react to what you think is going on. That's the way it is. Okay? And these reactions are under your control. We don't think they are. Okay? We don't think they're under our control. We think that it's all happening. Okay? And we're just a pawn in the machine. Okay? That's what we think, because that's what we've been trained to think. Okay? But that's just not the way it is. The way it is that these emotional feelings or reactions, whatever you want to call them, are just part of life. And they don't have any meaning unless we assign that meaning to them. Okay? When you're feeling fear, okay, if you could just take a moment and look at that feeling, okay, and try to understand what it means from the perspective of the now, then the fear will not have the power over you that it does. And that's really the whole thing. All these emotions have power over you because they have power over your body. They use your body in order to affect your mind. Okay? It sounds crazy, I know. But that's the way it is. And really, we don't have to have a fear response. Okay? We don't. We do have one because we think that's what the meaning is. But we're the ones making the meaning. I mean, I know this is kind of hard to understand, but basically, it's all in your control, okay? By simply looking at what is going on in your life, you can make it better, okay? Unmask it, okay? Whatever the thing that's happening to you, the emotion storm or whatever, you need to look at it and figure out what's the meaning, where did it come from, okay? And what it really means. It just means that you're having this emotional response. That's all, okay? It doesn't mean anything more than that. And when we give the fear and the anxiety and the sadness or depression the meaning that we do, that causes suffering. That's all there is to it. In order to awaken, we need to accept that that is so. Accept that whatever you're fearing, the fear isn't real. You made it fear. You created fear by saying it means fear. Okay? No one else did that. Yes, it's true when you were having your upbringing, your parents taught you to fear certain things and embrace others, and that's just part of everything. But still, the meaning is coming from inside your brain. Okay? Nowhere else. And by being a victim of your fear, you're letting the ego control you. That's what you're doing. I know that you don't want that. I assume you don't want that. I assume what you want is to have freedom from that. Freedom from the endless thoughts in your head that you don't like. And freedom from the meaning of fear that's false. It's a false meaning. It's not true. I know that's hard to sort of understand, but try and realize that you are the one who's making it mean what it means. Okay? That's what it is. Okay? No one else. There's no one else to blame. You're the one, when you feel that feeling of sadness, okay, what you're really feeling is your body reacting to an emotion. And you say, I'm sad. And you put the emotion of sadness onto that. You put the meaning of sadness onto that emotional response. Okay? And that's how you had your whole life to do that. And when you can look at the feeling, we have all these feelings that are constantly coming in, okay? And we don't look at them. We don't pay attention to them. They come and go. Same thing with the thoughts. But we can look at them. We can, from the position of now, okay? Which means meditation or going into your body's energy field or surfing a wave, you can get into the now. Okay? And that's it. And once you're there, then you can look at what is actually happening to you and take control away from the ego. Take the meaning that you have made for a particular set of stimulus and say, that's not me. That's not the meaning I want it to have anymore. I don't like that meaning. Okay? Simple as that. Now, I know this is kind of hard to understand how that could be, but that's the way it is. Okay? As we grow, as we develop as kids, these meanings get attached to us. The meaning of fear, the meaning of sadness, the meaning of anger, the meaning of jealousy or anxiety. And these meanings that we have put upon these things, because we were taught to put them there, we were conditioned to put them there, we were programmed to put them there by society, is what's causing your unhappiness. Okay? I know it's hard to think of fear as something that you have put a meaning onto. Okay? It's not fear at all. It's simply an emotional response. You have made it into fear. I know it's crazy, but that's what you've done. And the same thing with everything else. Okay? These emotional responses are part of the ego's trap. Okay? To control you. That's what it is. Okay? And the best thing that you can do for yourself is to look at what the emotion is doing to your body. Feel what it's doing to your body and feel for what the meaning is. Okay? That's it. Okay? I know it's hard to do that because this world is so distracting and it's very hard to get time to be in the now, but if you just take 10 minutes in the now, okay? Then you'll be able to see. You'll be able to see what this emotional response is generating inside your mind. Okay? The emotional responses are going to be there. That is part of being human. These emotional responses are there, and we, are stuck with them. But it doesn't necessarily mean what you think it means. Life is so hard, and it's hard because we don't know what we're doing, okay? Just like your parents didn't know what they were doing, and you don't know what you're doing, because basically, this hasn't been taught in school. So you're completely ignorant of the true state of the affairs. Okay? And that's part of the problem with having your mind controlled by the ego. So, try to look into your own feelings. Okay? When you feel that fear coming up, okay? Try and get into the now and examine it like a scientist would examine a bug or whatever. Okay? And examine exactly what is the feeling. Okay? Not with any labels on it. We label everything. That's part of being human too. We need to just take these labels off of fear or whatever it is. Anxiety, sadness, jealousy, hate. Okay? And remove these labels because these labels aren't helping you. And so that's the whole point, is to give yourself a chance to see that this is hurting you. And as long as you are oblivious and living in a dream, you can't affect change in your life. I hear people say all the time, oh, why have I gotten myself into this mess? You've gotten yourself into this mess because you weren't making the decisions. You've gotten yourself into this mess because you weren't in on the planning stage. Okay? Because your ego was doing all the thinking, doing all the planning. And now here you are. But by looking at our emotions, okay, with awareness, you are awareness. That is what you are. And by looking at your emotions, looking at the feeling in your body, okay, you can see what it is. It's just a feeling. It doesn't mean anything unless you make it mean something. Anyway, so try and get a few minutes of nowness happening in your life. And while you're in the now, look at yourself. Just look at the feelings that you're having. Look at the thoughts that you're having. This is the first step towards that spiritual enlightenment. By observing your own situation and seeing that it's not as black and white as you thought it was. I mean, we have this idea that everything is the way we think it is, but it's not. Because most of what we're thinking isn't true. Okay? That's just the way it is. Why isn't it true? Well, because you're not the one doing the thinking. Because you are a soul. Okay? I know this is hard to try and understand, but you're not the one in charge of your brain. You're along for the ride. Okay? And as long as that's so, then you're at the mercy of the ego and of experiencing these emotions the way the ego wants you to experience them. The ego is trying to get you to be sad. The ego is trying to get you to be afraid, because that way it has more control over you. It can nudge you in the direction it wants you to go. That's just the way it is. Okay? If you don't want that for your life, which I assume you don't, then you need to take time and get into the now. Spend a few minutes a day even, or 10 minutes a day, or however long you can, with just concentrating or putting your attention on one thing. Once you have all of your attention on one thing, everything else stops. The feelings, the emotions, the thoughts can't exist at the same time as that one thing. It isn't possible. That's the way it is. We have one-track minds. Anyway, so that's part of the awakening process. Okay, and then once you have seen that this feeling of fear that you have been clinging to which you have been. Okay? I know you probably think to yourself, I'm not really clinging to the fear. I don't want the fear. But the fact is, you're saying, I am afraid. You're acknowledging an emotional state, and you're saying, that's me. Okay, I know language is very tricky, and sometimes it's really hard to tell what you're saying to yourself, but that's what you're doing. And by not accepting that, these things are happening, you're causing your own suffering. Okay? Whatever kind of emotional response is going on in your life, due to whatever, needs to be looked at. Just like you need to look at the thoughts and detect where they are coming from. And that's just the way it is. And, every day we have things happen, challenges come up, and we have a response to the challenge. And that response could be fear. Maybe the fear of not fitting in, or the fear of not being enough, or whatever it is. And that fear is like a ghost. Only to you it's real, but no one else can perceive it because it doesn't exist. Okay? It's a ghost inside your mind. So, try and look at what is going on. Try and just, when you feel the emotion coming on, you feel the onset of emotion, at that moment, go into the now and look at it. Emotions come up and then they go back down. Same thing with thoughts, up and then down. And just like there's a space between each thought that you can use to get more awareness into your life, okay? There's a space between each emotion. We tend to think of things as different, okay? Because that's how we've been trained. That's how we've been conditioned and programmed to think of things. But that's just not the way they are. And as long as we're hanging on to the past, which means the conditioning, the historical you, the conditioned you is what you're hanging on to. Because you think that's you and you need to hang on to it. You need to keep it the way it is. Okay? And you fight to do that. Because you want what you want. Okay? For your life. But that's not the way it has to be. You can detach from these feelings. You can detach from the meaning that you have made for the feelings. And that meaning is really something that has taken an entire life, okay, to form inside you, okay? That's all there is to it. I don't know if you've ever seen a little baby, or not baby, but a little toddler fall down and hurt himself. And he's perfectly fine. But when the mommy comes over and says, "Oh, baby, did you hurt yourself?" the crying starts. Right? Because the toddler had no meaning to put with that hurt. So it didn't make any difference to it. But as soon as someone came and put the meaning of hurtness onto that event, okay, it cried. That's how it works. And whether you're a toddler or a 40-year-old, or whatever you are, those meanings are in you, and you have to deal with them. Okay? And as long as you are trapped by these meanings, because that's what you are, you're trapped, because you are in a dream. Okay? I know a lot of people are like, "I'm not in a dream, I'm perfectly conscious." Well, that's not the way it really is. Okay? And these emotions that plague you are simply programmed, pre-programmed into you to mean what you want it to mean. Even though you may not want it to mean that, that's the way it is. Okay? And awakening is seeing through all that. Okay? Whether or not you're having ecstasy from whatever, from winning, You went to the casino and you won big. You got ecstasy. Right? Or from getting a job. Oh, I'm so happy because I got the job. I'm in ecstasy. Or maybe whatever. And that meaning is what you put onto that emotional response in your body. And it's the same emotional response as the emotional response to fear. But you think it's different because the context says it's different. The context that you invented. The context that you made. I know it's hard to try and understand some of these things because, it's just not easy. Okay? And I'm trying to explain something that's unexplainable because we have a way of thinking as unawakened people, okay? And that way of thinking is hard drived into us, okay? I can't think of a better word, okay? Etched into us by everything. And that includes all the meanings for all the things that go on in your body, okay? And that includes if you have a stomach pain or if you have a whatever, you put the meaning of that, you slap the label on, boom. And now I know what it is. I'm not afraid because I know what it is, okay? But you are afraid because you're not seeing the real emotional reaction. You're seeing the emotional reaction plus the context plus the label that you slapped on it, okay? And that's just the way it is. So, try to get into the now. Meditate. Put all your attention on one thing. One pointedness of mind. Okay? And once you have done that, nothing else is going to happen. The emotions aren't going to happen because you have one pointedness. Once you lose that one pointedness and you start looking at other things in your life aside from your breathing or the energy field of your body, okay? Then you come out of the now and you're back in the trap of time. The trap of, everything else that's going on in your life. So, what we want to try and do is when we feel this emotion coming up, okay, try and look at it from the point of view of the now, okay? I know it's hard. It's hard to go into the now when you're scared stiff. But you can do it, okay? Breathe in. Pay attention to the breath. Pay attention to the feeling of the breath going into your lungs. Pay attention to all of it, but not to anything else. And you can be in the now. Okay? And once you're in the now, then you can see what's going on. You can see the emotional response without the labels, without the conditioning, without the programming. Okay? And once you do see it as that, as what it is, which is just an emotional response, then it doesn't have any power over you. I know that's crazy, isn't it? But the fact is, you have made the power over you that you have suffered under by saying it's this. It's that's what you've done. The fear has a power over you because you have given it power over you. Okay? Not because you're bad or anything else. It's just the way everybody, was raised and so on and so forth. Okay? But there's no reason to allow that power to continue having power over you. Okay? And that is to awaken. To realize that you are not the one doing the thinking. You are not the one doing the feeling. Okay? That's just the way it is. And when someone yells at you at work and makes you feel bad and you start to fear that you're going to lose your job or whatever it is, okay, you can react and be afraid, or you can go within. One breath is all it takes. And see what this is. Where's the fear coming from? The fear is coming from the hole in your life. And that hole is filled with all the things that you have put there, like the labels. Anyway, so just try and see. Just try and look from the point of view of the now and see what the label is that you have put upon this emotional response. Every emotional response has a label. Okay, that's just the way it is. Because that's what human beings do. We label everything. Okay? Which is fine. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but unfortunately that tends to make life difficult. It makes it unhappy. Okay? So, what we want to try and do is accept what is. Accept that these labels are not you. Okay? And the meaning that you have given to this particular emotional response and the context surrounding the emotional response isn't you either. And as long as you think it's you, then you're going to be trapped by it. Okay? That's just the way it is. I don't want it to be that way, but I have no power over that. Anyway, the clock on the wall is telling me it's time to go. I've enjoyed talking to you. Please, if you have any questions about anything I've said, if anything I've said doesn't make sense to you, ask me the question in the comments, and I'll be happy to respond and make a video about it to help elucidate any points that I haven't quite made clear. Okay? I love you all because you're me, because we're all one thing. We're all one. And that oneness is what is really good about life. Because we're in the dream, we can't see it. We can't feel it. Which is why we need to wake up from the dream. Well, anyhow, have a great day and a great life.